games for the first place Baltimore Orioles. I've known this guy a little while. This guy's done a great brand of sports radio out in Seattle for many years, covering all things out there at KJR. You can follow his journey out on Twitter at SoftyKJR. He is Dave Softy Mahler, joining us back again from Seattle, where they had high expectations and a pretty high brand of baseball in the beginning of the year. But man, you can only take one injury to the king, and then the whole kingdom kind of falls, right, Softy?
Yeah, it's been a disaster, man, pretty much in the month of June. They got off to a hot start April, May. As a matter of fact, on June the 3rd, and I bring up June the 3rd because I took off for Italy for 2 weeks on June 3rd. The morning I left, they were in first place. So when I got back 2 weeks later, they were 8.5 games out. So they just totally collapsed, and right now we're 11.5 games out, a couple of games out in the wild card, but they just won their first series of the month of June the other day against the Cardinals, and the problem, as you said, man, has been the health of the starting rotation. I mean, look, they lost a couple of guys in the bullpen, Tony Zick, Joaquin Benoit, Charlie Furbush have all been banged up this season, but then you talk about Felix going down with the calf injury, Wade Miley goes down, Taijuan Walker misses a start. That's 60% of your starting rotation, and they've had to take guys like Vidal Nuno, who was a reliever, and have him start a game when Adrian Sampson hurt his shoulder in pregame warm-ups and couldn't throw last week. So it's been pretty much a disaster. And if you know baseball, I know that you do, when you have your rotation banged up, all of a sudden guys filling in, instead of going 6-7 innings a start, are going 4 or 5 innings a start, and it just puts that much more stress on your bullpen. So the pitching has totally fallen apart. The offense has been okay. They've gone from 21st a year ago in runs scored to 7th this year, so give Jerry Dipoto credit for that, for the small amount of time he's had to kind of mess around with this roster over the offseason. But there's not much you can do if you're Jerry Dipoto or Scott Service when guys are getting banged up in your starting pitching staff the way they have the last month or so, man.
Softy, you talk about King Felix. It's not only just that he's such a great pitcher and he's going to give you 7 or 8 more than most number ones at the top of rotation. And I know maybe this part of the conjecture is that he's getting a little older and he goes out there and he really is a horse. But then the quality of the innings you get. I mean, we've had the bottom of the rotation problems here where all the money spent on Gallardo, all the money spent on Jimenez, and those guys are the box of chocolates. But when you have a one and you lose him, there's just no replacing that. And they're going to scuffle as long as he's out. Now, word is he's getting back on a schedule. At some point, he will come back. The question is whether the Mariners are still going to be in this race or not.
Yeah, I think they'll be in the wild card race because their offense will at least give them a chance to stay expanded play. I think the better, but with Felix Hernandez, I mean, look, even before he went down, the ERA was under 3, but he wasn't the same Felix Hernandez. He was walking the house. His whip was way up from where it was a year ago. So they don't just need Felix Hernandez back. They need the Felix Hernandez back on this baseball team.
Hi, man. My man Steve Johnson was out there for a couple of cups of coffee, too. I mean, he's a favorite son of Baltimore, and I'll be honest, when he left under injury circumstances, I never thought he'd be back in the big leagues. And not only back in the big leagues, he was back in the big leagues when they were in first place.
Right. Well, and again, the issue with Stevie Johnson is the same issue that some other Mariner pitchers have, in that he can't control himself. I mean, he's got, 16 innings, 17 strikeouts, but 11 walks overall, so the strikeout-to-walk ratio is not very good. But look, with a guy like Stevie Johnson, you just kind of throw him into the pile with a guy like Donnie Roach and David Rollins, 2 guys that were just called up from AAA Tacoma. When Jerry Dipoto put this roster together back in April, he did not envision Stevie Johnson being in the bullpen in June, but he's had no choice because so many guys have been banged up. Joel Peralta was let go. Benoit got hurt. Tony Zick got hurt. Charlie Furbush got hurt. So that's 4 relievers of the 7 that started the year in April on your 25-man roster. They've had no choice but to bring guys up like Stevie Johnson, Roach, and Rollins, and players like that. So hopefully those guys will get healthy, and those players like Stevie can go back to doing what the Mariners thought they would do, which is be providing depth in AAA.
Dave Softy Mahler joining us here from KJR in Seattle. The Birds out there for 4 games. Nice long weekend of activity out there and a beautiful time of the year. Dude, it took us a year to get even with you guys on the whole cruise thing. I mean, it was stupid that the Orioles ever let him get away for a million reasons that I'm sure we'll go through. But the Trumbo thing, I don't think anybody out there was, crying that he was leaving. And for the Orioles, look, they picked him up as an insurance policy because they really didn't think Chris Davis was coming back. They thought thought he would be Chris Davis. He's turned out to be the better player this year, and maybe harkens back to the days in Anaheim when he was a 30 home run guy. He's been the difference for this team being a first-place team, in my opinion.
Well, it's the second time we've given you a hitter that's turned out to be phenomenal. The first one was Adam Jones for Eric Bedard, and now it's Mark Trumbo for Clevenger. Who Clevenger's been a quality backup for Chris Iannetta, but he's not making a huge impact on the hitting staff. And look, with Trumbo, yeah, you're right. Nobody was sorry to see the guy go because he stunk when he was in Seattle. But I'm not surprised by it, man. Go back and look at what Trumbo did when he was playing alongside Mike Trout in Anaheim. 4, 5, 6 years ago, he was phenomenal. I mean, he was a guy that many people thought was on the come, was going to be a Grady the guy go because he stunk when he was in Seattle. But I'm not surprised by it, man. Go back and look at what Trumbo did when he was playing alongside Mike Trout in Anaheim. 4, 5, 6 years ago, he was phenomenal. I mean, he was a guy that many people thought was on the come, was going to be a great compliment for a lot of years to Trout, and just never turned out once he took off, went to Arizona, and then came here to Seattle. But Mariner fans who typically take notice when ex-Mariners take off and do well, because it happens all the time, really aren't that upset about it, because the two guys that are taking Mark Trumbo's spot at first base are Adam Lind and Dae-Ho Lee, and those two guys right now are on pace for 40-plus bombs and 130 RBIs between the two of them combined. So what they're getting from the first base position right now versus what they got a year ago, man, is night and day.
And the Nelson Cruz signing, that has to be among the better acquisitions, right? I mean, the Mariners don't really spend money like drunken sailors, although the Cano thing, may argue with that. I thought Cruz was an incredible value. And the one thing, Softy, that I would say from him being here, look, he came here under the halo of the PEDs, and what kind of a dude was he, and what are they doing, and he's a rental player, and is he going to stay on the field, is he going to hit the ball? Not only that, he was a really good guy, still is a good guy,
great
and
dude.
Really good with the Latin players, and I know that that's a big part of what's going on in Seattle, and I think the Orioles missed that big time, and they really whiffed on that last offseason.
Well, they did, and look, he's been great since he showed up here. He's been really consistent, he's got 50-plus RBIs for the second time before the All-Star break in his 2 years here as a Mariner, and really he's been more consistent than Robinson Cano, who was the big pickup, obviously, 2.5 years ago, and I shudder to think where this offense would be without Nelson Cruz, because Robinson Cano, for the first year when he was in Seattle, all people talked about is, hey, Robbie Cano's not having the same year that he had in New York the year before because the hitting here is not as good and he needs some protection. Well, they go out and they get Nelson Cruz, and Robbie Cano ends up getting a virus in his belly and can't perform like he can last year, and then all of a sudden he gets healthy. Second half of the year he's awesome, and the Cruz-Cano combo along with Seager, that threesome has been phenomenal in Seattle. You got three guys right now that are all on pace for 30-plus bombs, and in Cruz's case, well over 40. So he's been great ever since he showed up here. He's been able to hit at Safeco Field, which a lot of people can't do, and I would not want to imagine, man, this lineup without Nelson Cruz, because it would look a lot different, buddy.
Man, the math is kind of overwhelming how long it's been since the Mariners have played October baseball. I would think...
That was 15 years ago. It's not that hard. I'll just tell you right now. It's 2001.
And it's the longest
I think
running...
you were, about 7 years old back then?
Come on now. I've been doing this 25 years, Softy. So, yeah, I mean, I remember when the Mariners were good. Really good, actually.
Well, a lot of people have forgotten about those days, man. Look, you got to figure it this way, buddy. If you are a college freshman and you're 19, 20 years old right now in Seattle, you have no memory whatsoever of Mariner playoff baseball. None.
And we had that with the Orioles, dude. We had 14 years when we didn't make the playoffs here, so it's all me saying first place Orioles. Dude, I've been on the radio 25 years. There haven't been a whole lot of days in June and July. I can say first place Orioles here over 25
years. With us. I mean, the M's are in first place for a large part of May, a decent part of April, and we're almost taking like screenshots of our computers to make sure we remember what it looks like to have the M's in first place in the standings. But now that they've had this terrible June, they're almost lucky to be at 500, man, at 38-38 with all the injuries they've had. But again, the biggest reason why they're right there is because of the great April, the great May, and because the offense has gone from 21st to 7th in runs scored from a year ago. The M's right now, I think, are second or third in baseball in home runs. I know you guys are up there as well. But bottom line is, man, is that there's an entire generation of fans that have no clue what October baseball is all about in Seattle.
Well,
None.
I know how lime green it is when I was up there on the tour last year and how Seahawked up the whole place is.
Yeah.
Does that put more pressure on them 5 weeks from now to, if they're still a 500 team? 500 used to be white flag, Softy. Now, 500 is, well, let's go get a pitcher and maybe we'll go out, let's go get a bat. Let's go do something. I would think Seattle's as inclined to do that as anyone because if they could smell the playoffs, why not go for it?
Well, the problem is, what do they have to give up in regards to that bat or that reliever or that starting pitcher? I mean, right now, they don't have a lot. Their minor league system is in shambles, man, for the most part. Jack Sorensic flushed it down the toilet, and Jerry DiPoto has been cleaning up the mess ever since he showed up here. They don't have a lot of commodities right now to trade. So, they might want to go out and make a move. They went out and got Wade LeBlanc from the Blue Jays last week, and he had a great start last Friday against St. Louis and pitched 6 shutout innings. But really outside of that, outside of the journeyman type of guy, there's not a lot of ammunition left in the Mariners minor league system to go out and make a trade. So I think they're kind of stuck, but if they are within a couple of games of the wild card race on July 31st, you might see them go out and get somebody. But as far as the Seahawks putting pressure on the Mariners, I mean, look, the pressure has been on the M's to win ever since 2001. They are now one of 2 teams left in baseball that has never been to a World Series, them and the Washington Nationals, okay? So it's already embarrassing. They got rid of the owner, they got rid of the president, they got rid of the GM, and they fired the manager, and they still are having a hard time getting people to believe and jump on the wagon here.
And DiPoto being a part of it. Look, I talked to folks in Anaheim as they're in last place who would tell you that he left the cupboard incredibly bare there.
Yeah.
He is now being charged with being the architect of fixing the mess in Seattle. Some thoughts about, the first 6-7 months with him?
Well, I think it's been great. I really do. I mean, I think outside of the injuries, which there's nothing Jerry can do about that, the fact that the offense has become a legitimate major league offense, which by a lot of people's standards around baseball may not mean much, but when you're as bad as the M's have been offensively for the past decade, being legitimate and going from 4 runs a game to 5 runs a game for this group is a significant jump. The Daeho Lee signing was phenomenal. The trade for Leonis Martin was great. The signing of Adam Lynn, the trade for Chris Iannetta, all those moves have paid off so far for this baseball team. They're still looking for a left fielder because Nori Aoki is now in Tacoma in AAA, so they got to find some help in the outfield. But if not for the injuries, this is probably a team that's maybe 7 or 8 games above 500. And if they're 7 or 8 games above 500, there's nobody in baseball that does not look at Jerry DiPoto and think he's doing a hell of a job.
It wouldn't be very Baltimore of me if I didn't rub in the Adam Jones, Chris Tillman thing. But I got to tell you what, dude, I've been doing this a long time, and we don't have any trades to brag about in Baltimore. The Glenn Davis thing is 30 years later. We're still talking about how we got screwed in that deal with Schilling and Harnish and those guys. The Juan Bell and the Eddie Murray deal and all that. This is the one deal in the history of modern Orioles that they actually won,
Yeah.
And I can understand you're still
listen,
salty about it,
You really hosed us on the Eric Bedard deal, okay? I mean, Eric Bedard came to Seattle, obviously.
He was a bad guy.
Ago.
He was a bad human being, Eric Bedard.
Well, not only was he a bad guy, he was a grumpy bastard, number one, and then number two, I just think he was soft. It's a guy that did not want to go out there for the 6th inning, let alone the 7th inning, had no competitive spirit about him whatsoever, not a competitive bone in his body whatsoever. And if the M's would have known that, if Bill Bavasi, who made that trade, would have known that, there's no way they would have given up what they gave up for Eric Bedard. I mean, at the time, the guy's numbers were pretty good, but I can't believe how soft he was and how just, unwilling he was to compete. Most starting pitchers want that ball until their arm falls off. Eric Bedard was not like that whatsoever, man. So I have no idea about his background, or maybe he was just unhappy when he came to Seattle and, had an issue with the rain here or the weather. I have no idea. But my God, was he soft, and he was nowhere near the competitor we thought he was going to be.
He pitched for a while in Ottawa where it was like 18 degrees in April, so I would think Seattle's an upgrade for that either way. Dave Softy Mahler joining us here from Seattle. You can follow him at SoftyKJR out in Seattle. Hey, Ken Griffey this summer going to Hall of Fame. That's a big deal for the Mariners, right?
That's huge. I mean, it's their first real big-time Hall of Famer that came from their own system. I mean, look, they've had obviously Randy Johnson, but he was acquired via trade with Montreal, back in the late 80s, and then finished his career, for the most part, with Arizona, and really became a legend in Arizona. He was great when he was in Seattle. But when he went to Arizona, he became a first ballot Hall of Famer. We had, Gaylord Perry was here for a while in Seattle, but the first Mariner to be drafted by the organization to become a Hall of Famer and to have the most votes ever and the highest vote percentage ever in the history of baseball is pretty awesome, man. A guy that did it the right way, never took drugs, never took steroids, probably could have played maybe 4 or 5 more years if he had. And you think about all the wear and tear on his body from those days in the Kingdome, playing on that cement turf and smashing up against the wall in center field. If not for the Kingdome, and if not for maybe playing at Safeco Field, maybe he would have, hit 700 home runs. If not, maybe played 3 or 4 more years. So he's the favorite son for Mariner fans in Seattle. He's going to have his number retired this August as well, and it's really deserved. He's the first Mariner ever to have his number retired, besides Jackie Robinson, obviously, and it could not go to a better guy.
Is he going to throw some shade on the voters for the Edgar Martinez nonsense who deserves to be in the Hall of Fame?
I hope he does. I mean, look, the guy's got the DH award named after him, for crying out loud, and he can't even get into the Hall of Fame.
It is crazy, man. I watched him play. He was a Hall of Famer.
Well, he was the best all-around hitter the Mariners have ever had, and that's saying something, considering Griffey, Buhner, A-Rod, Alvin Davis, Ichiro, players like that.
Well, Griffey would probably tell you that, right?
Yeah, nobody hit for average, nobody hit for power, nobody had the on-base percentage, the slugging percentage the way Edgar Martinez did. And my problem with it is that if Edgar Martinez played left field and was an awful defender, he probably would be in the Hall of Fame, but because the guy's a DH and never played in the field, people want to ding him for it. So I don't know about you. I would rather have a guy in the dugout just hitting as opposed to going out and hurting me in left field and playing a terrible outfield for me, but because he never played in the field, people like to kill the guy.
Well, I mean, I see the same thing with the football guys, with punters and kickers. They play too. It's a position. You know what I mean? Like, dude had 9,000 at-bats in the big leagues. Let's not, say he didn't have a glove. They allowed him to not have a glove. It's a position, He didn't break any rules.
He's going to make the Hall of Fame, and he's pretty much been a full-time DH for the last, decade or so. So I don't get it. Look, I mean, the Hall of Fame is about numbers, and Edgar's numbers across the board are as consistent as anybody in baseball. Compare him to the Harmon Killebrews and the Ted Williams and the Al Kalines of the world. Top 5 at all those major categories. Man, not a lot of guys can say that. He belongs on the Hall of Fame, and I hope Griffey does throw some shade on the voters when he goes in July.
Softy, last thing for you, because I did see the U.S. team play out in Seattle. I know Messi played out there. I know you're a soccer community. I'm a soccer guy. I did not see Messi on American soil this time. It's on my bucket list to actually physically see him play a real game, not one of these they run around in their shorts and play a friendly or something like that, or one of these tour games. I'm embarrassed that I didn't see him play, but you had something special going on in Seattle, and it was a pretty good tournament. I enjoyed it.
Well, look, the problem with the U.S. team is that they're a big tease, okay? I don't know about you and how closely you follow the World Cup and things like that, but I went to South Africa, 5 or 6 years ago when the U.S. made the round of 16, and there was all this buzz about U.S. soccer taking the next step, and they haven't taken the next step. And I think a lot of people in Seattle love the game, and they love the Sounders of the MLS who aren't playing well right now, despite the fact that Clint Dempsey's here. But the bottom line is American soccer is never going to take off until we make a run in the World Cup. Nobody gives a damn about, Copa America or the U.S. Open Cup or the MLS. They want to run in the World Cup, and it just feels like we're a million miles away from making something like that happen.
I don't disagree with that, and I'm not shocked that we're still a million miles away from that, but there have been a couple of decent runs. I mean, I go back to the big games they played back in 2002. I went to the World Cup in 2006 in Europe, and I sat through that disappointment in Gelsenkirchen, and I was at the Italy game as well. Obviously, the South Africa thing was, a fiasco, but I feel like they're competitive enough to be interesting, but when the game's on our own soil, it would be nice to fill a few stadiums with some red, white, and blue.
Well, and they'll fill it in Seattle because people up here are soccer crazy, but when you play Argentina and you get your ass kicked 4-0, and then you get beaten by Colombia in the third place game and don't even show up, I mean, people just wonder where's this thing going? And as you said, there's been some nice moments, but that's what we get, okay? I mean, Germany gets championships. Argentina gets championships. We get nice moments. The sports gods in soccer have blessed us with nice moments in soccer. I'm tired of nice moments, man. I want to win. I want to play for a World Cup trophy. That's what I want, and that's what you should want.
Well, root for the girls.
You know what? Listen, that's the best we got right now, baby. No doubt. I was up in Vancouver watching them kick Japan's ass last summer. That was fun as hell.
I know it was fun, and I know half of the border flew across there, especially with all your soccer nuts up there. Hey, good luck to the Seahawks this year. We'll be wearing some lime green here. Always great having you on, Softy.
All right, man, later.
You got it. Dave Softy Mahler joining us here from Seattle and KJR. You can follow his journey out on Twitter at Softy KJR, doing all things out there in Seattle, #1 sports radio show host. Great to have him aboard. Orioles keeping us up late in Seattle into the weekend, and then, of course, to Dodger Stadium to take on one of my favorite stadiums. 4th of July, Dodger Stadium. It's where I was last year. They're playing the Mets this year. Orioles, Dodgers. In the cradle of baseball. So if you got friends going out there, they'll be putting pictures up making you sick of all those palm trees next week. You can find me out on the Buy a Toyota Audio of all 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn radio app. We do come in crystal clear anywhere you are. The morning newspaper's powered up by Planet Fitness, and it's your email inbox at 7 a.m. And, of course, our text service for any breaking news. It happens first on your mobile device, brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. My WNST Rock Week is coming the week of July 11th. Interviews with David Bowie and Billy Joel and John Bon Jovi and the Black Crowes and the Red Hot Chili Peppers, amongst many, many, many others. I got about 180 interviews. I'm only going to air about 60, but you will hear them the week of July 11th. I hope you're digging that. The hashtag is WNST Rock Week. I'm Nestor. This is WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Taos in Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.